2022, a voter education program brought to you by the Shakopee Chamber of Commerce. My name is Tim Zunker, and I'm the president with the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau. Our hope is that these candidate interviews and profiles will help you, the voter, understand your choices when it comes to the 2022 elections. We ask voters to arm themselves with the information necessary to make educated choices and to make casting your vote a priority. Please visit the Shakopee Chamber website at shakopee.org to find out more information about the upcoming election. And now I'd like to introduce Angie Craig, our current Congresswoman for Congressional District 2, who is running for re-election. Angie, thank you for joining us today. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, Tim, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with you today, and it's such an honor to represent the city of Shakopee and to work with the Chamber of Commerce. Look, our community has been through a lot over the past 2+ years. I've been there right alongside each of you. The City Council and the Mayor, Bill Mars, have done just an extraordinary job, I believe, along with the business community in adapting to what is happening. I was one of the authors of the Paycheck Protection Program. I championed the Restaurant Revitalization Fund and so many of the many activities we had to save our small businesses across the 2nd Congressional District. Look, I always say I'll work with anyone with a good idea, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat. And my record shows that I am among the top 3% most bipartisan members of Congress, according to Common Ground Committee, an independent analysis. I will continue to do that. I'll continue to serve as your representative in advocating for small businesses. In fact, 92% of the businesses in the 2nd are small businesses. I've pushed congressional leadership to lower healthcare costs. I've been laser focused on our supply chain issues. I've called for the president to release more oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. I have been absolutely focused on reforming Washington. So as your member of Congress, that's what I'm going to continue to do, is look for common ground, support the business community, and I really look forward to earning your vote.
Great. Thank you, Angie. Let's get into the questions. If you could write, sign, and pass 3 laws today, what would they be and why?
Well, thank you for the question. I'll start with one of the bills that I've already written and introduced in the Congress, and that would be to lower the federal tax rate for small businesses to 18% from the current 21% today. Look, I think that inflation has been challenging. Input costs have gone up, and I think this would give our small businesses on that first $400,000 of revenue, lowering the federal tax rate would give businesses a little bit of breathing room. The second bill that I've already written and half passed it into law is to cap co-pays of insulin at $35 a month. We've done this into law for Medicare and Medicaid beneficiaries, and I'd also like to get that done for those who have private insurance plans. Look, I ran a healthcare plan for a Fortune 500 company before I came to Congress. I know healthcare costs continue to go up. That's why I serve on the Health Subcommittee of the U.S. Congress, and that's why I've been so focused on lowering the cost of healthcare. And then my final bill that I've written, it's not into law yet, it's called the Humble Act. It would prevent members of Congress from trading individual stocks. It would prevent members of Congress from becoming lobbyists once they're done with their service to our community, because I fundamentally believe that my constituents must know that I'm here to serve them, not a special interest.
Great. Thank you, Angie. Coming out of the pandemic, businesses are being affected by workforce shortages, supply chain issues, and inflation. What policies would you support to help businesses struggling with these issues?
Well, look, certainly rising input costs have been challenging. Most of the reason for that has been the supply chain. I am a strong proponent of de-risking our supply chain by incentivizing American manufacturing back right here in the United States. One of the bills that I've supported is the CHIPS Act, which is going to bring semiconductor manufacturing back to the U.S. I also, though, believe that we've got to invest in our workforce. And by that, I mean, we've got to rethink American education in this country. Certainly, for many students, going to a four-year university is something that is right for them. For three of my sons, that was right. But for many others, I think we've got to make sure that those pathways, like we have in our high schools right here locally in Shakopee, kids know that there are many different paths to a really good career. And so I've introduced something called the 21st Century Workforce Act, which would provide for public-private partnership grant dollars to build exactly those programs. And I'm also well aware that Scott County doesn't have a technical training college. And so there's so many great activities going on in the county and, of course, the city of Shakopee. But we need to make sure that students know that trade schools, that a technical education is a really great way to earn a living. And of course, we know these are in-demand jobs. And we've done so much in this area, Tim, it's hard to really focus on one thing, but the Ocean Shipping Reform Act was really important to getting those containers unloaded in America's ports. And look, I'm optimistic that we're going to get back to where we need to be. I'm optimistic because I've met so many business owners who are just continuing to grow. But workforce is going to remain an issue. Input costs are an issue. That's why I've introduced the bill that would lower the tax rate for small businesses.
Great. Thank you, Angie. According to the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, there were roughly 395 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents in 2021 in the 7-county metro region, which is a 24% increase over 2020 levels. What initiatives would you focus on at the federal level to help local communities reduce crime?
Well, Tim, it's a really important question. And I believe that the number one responsibility of any elected leader is to make sure that our public feels safe and our businesses feel safe. So what I've done, I've advocated fiercely to fund local law enforcement. In fact, when conversations began back November about eliminating a major city's police department, I stood up to those in my own party, and I called it what it is, which was an absolute terrible idea, and I came out publicly against it. I've voted to fund the police time and time again, and that is the major role of a federal elected official. Those community-oriented policing grants that come out from the Department of Justice, the burn grants, it helps our local police departments hire new officers. And right now, throughout the second, I've got 4 outstanding applications within cities to hire 5 new officers in each of those cities that I am advocating for. In addition, I've been a strong supporter of the Scott County Sheriff's Department from a community project funding perspective. And we've got new equipment that is coming to them from that perspective. In addition, I've been a strong supporter of new grant programs, new legislation. There's something here, a bill called the Invest to Protect Act, which is a new grant program for small and medium-sized police departments, in addition to Pathways to Policing, because that bill would help us rebuild the pipeline of law enforcement officers inside the community. And finally, I'll just end with this on this answer. I think it's really important that we don't have knee-jerk reactions and that we support our rank and file police officers in every time that something happens. We've got to not criticize everybody for a single incident. So I've been willing to call out any rhetoric that I think is really harmful to our communities. And as your member of Congress, that's what I'm going to continue to do.
Thank you, Angie. What would your plan be to help with healthcare costs for businesses and families?
Well, I sit on the health subcommittee of an exclusive committee called Energy and Commerce. And so I've been right in the middle of this discussion. In fact, I helped lead a Fortune 500 company's health plan, self-insured health plan, when I was there as well. And so what I've done is a number of things. I've pushed the administration to allow Medicare to negotiate its drug pricing, just like private businesses can do in our nation. I put forward and had passed the House a bill that would cap the copay for insulin at $35 a month for our nation's citizens. What I've done is I've supported a bill that would cap senior drug costs at $2,000 annually, and I've extended the Affordable Care Act tax credits that would allow folks in the individual market to get less expensive health insurance. So, you know, healthcare is one of the expenses that was really hard to control when I helped lead the health plan. And it was really driven by increasing costs in specialty and compound drug pricing. And so you better bet I'm going to take the 22 years of healthcare experience that I have and continue to apply that to Congress and continue to drive down healthcare costs for American businesses.
Great. Thank you, Angie. With the continued infrastructure development needs in Shakopee and Scott County, what would your plan be at the federal level to assist with these ongoing projects?
Well, this is an area that I'm really excited about. Last year, I was able to secure $3.5 million in federal funding, along with the City Council and Mayor Mars, for the Riverfront Stabilization Project. I've been able to get in this next fiscal year budget, I think $1.5 million for the Innovation Hub right there in Shakopee, as well as some money for the Cultural Corridor Project. And those are just community-based projects that my philosophy has been to work with the city directly, the counties directly, to say, what are your highest priorities that need funding from a federal perspective? And let me come back to Washington and advocate for those. You know, Minnesota historically has been a net exporter of our tax dollars. And so I feel like my job is to work with my local communities and to get as much of that tax money back in the form of investment to the city of Shakopee and Scott County. You know, I'll end with this too. Look, the bipartisan infrastructure bill that passed the Congress last year, a lot of those dollars are not rolling out yet. But I think that that infrastructure bill is really going to be transformational to cities like Shakopee and to Scott County, which are obviously growing so fast. So I will continue to work with the city to make sure that we're making those infrastructure investments. And my experience in the private sector is that those public dollars in infrastructure that we spend often lead to additional private sector growth. So I really look forward to continuing my work with the city and of course with local businesses in that effort.
Great. Thank you, Angie. And as the Shakopee Chamber of Commerce, we are unapologetically pro-Shakopee and pro-business. How is your agenda pro-business?
Well, I'm unapologetically pro-Shakopee and pro-business as well, which is why I've been willing to introduce a bill that would lower the federal tax rate for our small businesses right here in the community, which is why I have so strongly supported the Paycheck Protection Program in the last couple of years, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, and of course fought to make sure that chambers of commerce would be eligible for those programs as well. We've been in this together, and I understand, I think more than most members of Congress or those running for Congress, that a business is not just a place where money comes in and out and where you make money. This is somebody's American dream. Somebody's dream is being fulfilled, and it's a huge risk to start a small business. So I can tell you that I will always be supportive of our small businesses. I'll be right in the middle of it with you. You'll be a partner in this work for me as your member of Congress, and I look forward to continuing to earn that support.
Great. Thank you, Angie. Now I'd like to give you the opportunity to give your closing statement and message to the voters.
Well, I have really, it's been an honor of my life to serve as the representative for the 2nd District of Minnesota. The city of Shakopee and my office and myself, as well as the local chamber, we've really been partners in this fight over the last couple of years as we've dealt with a public health crisis. I'm honored to be in Washington and go to bat for the city, to advocate for federal funding for these great programs over the course of the last couple of years, in particular, the Riverfront Stabilization Project, the Cultural Corridor, the Innovation Hub, and really, Shakopee, we're only getting started. I'm in my 2nd term in Congress, and I really look forward to continuing to earn the partnership and the support of the Shakopee business community and the city of Shakopee.
Great. Thank you, Angie. As a reminder, the views expressed in these interviews are those of the candidates, not those of the Chamber and Visitors Bureau. The Chamber is sponsoring these events as a service to the community and has gone to great lengths to ensure the objectivity. The Chamber does not endorse any candidate, but seeks to provide you, the citizens and voters of Shakopee, with the information you need to make an informed choice. The Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau extends a sincere thank you to the candidates. Thank you again, Angie. We appreciate your time and your service to our community by running for office. You are performing an important service to us all. Again, thank you for joining us for this edition of Meet the Candidates 2022. Please join us September 29th at River Valley Church for our candidate forum. Please visit the Shakopee Chamber website at shakopee.org for more information. Thank you. Thank you, Angie.
Hey, Tim, thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Before last week, did you worry about your safety just because you're a politician?
Yeah, unfortunately, members of Congress and many other elected officials, we've had a lot more direct threats. I think what happened last week wasn't a political event, but of course we worry, and we've had those threats. My wife and I moved about a year and a half ago. We've added additional security at home, really trying to make sure I'm protected from those targeted threats. So that's what made last week, I think, just a little bit different, at least in my own head. It wasn't a targeted attack, but it was still an attack.
Take me through it.
I came down to get my coffee from the lobby of the apartment building that I live in Washington when I'm there. And there was someone there who was acting erratically in the lobby. Immediately, I got my coffee and got back in the elevator as fast as I could. I didn't realize at first that he had followed me into the elevator. I'd already used my key fob to swipe myself up to the floor of my apartment building when he came in and again started acting erratically. He jumped down on the elevator floor and started doing push-ups. I immediately stopped our progress because I wanted to get him to get out of the elevator. I asked him sternly to get out of the elevator, and he became very agitated at that point. I told him, you don't have the key fob to come up. I'm going to need you to get off the elevator. Essentially at that point, and I won't go by the play-by-play with you, he stopped me from getting out of the elevator myself, got in my face, stepped in front of the buttons, wouldn't allow us to go up, wouldn't allow me to open, and indicated that I needed to take him to my apartment. I think it was at that moment where I realized this was not going to be something that I could reason with someone on. And that's when I started fighting back. Just tried to get him out of the way of the buttons. He grabbed my neck. He grabbed me from behind at one point, tried to pull me away again from the buttons, kind of from my collarbone this way. I had a cup of hot coffee in my hand because that's why I was in the lobby to begin with. And I reached over and poured the hot coffee on him as he was attempting to pull me back away from the buttons. He hit me in the face. The swelling is down now. You can still see there's a spot there. He cut my lip, lower lip. That's healing too after 5 days. But he wasn't going to let me out of the elevator. And so all the way up to my floor, we scuffled. And you know, at some point the elevator doors opened. He still wasn't going to let me out. He tried to pull me back into the elevator. And at that point I jumped out and started screaming for help. I was not going to let him get me to my apartment. And I knew that I had absolutely no choice but to fight back in that elevator. You know, I now know what his history is. My team over the weekend, there was an arrest on Thursday evening. I am the 13th assault on his record in the Washington, D.C. area. The 13th. Some of those prior assaults involved weapons. And so as I sit here today at home in Minnesota with my family, I'm just really glad that it wasn't worse, that he didn't have a weapon, that I was able to fight enough to get off that elevator, and that I'm here today.
Why would you ever go back to D.C. after that?
I have had such an outpouring of support from this district, from the state, from this nation, since this happened last week. Since I've been in Congress, I've been able to give 12 million more Americans health care. Look, I think what happened to me happens to people, especially women, every single day in our country. It just happened to happen to me last Thursday morning. And I also just happened to be a member of Congress. So this individual is homeless. He has mental health and addiction issues. He also is someone who's been violent now 13 times. How could I not go back? Because the intersection of all of these issues, that's what I'm asked to work on every single day in Congress. How could I not go back?
I see and hear you saying both we need to deal with the underlying issues that this particular person had for real.
Yeah.
And I sense you holding empathy for this person.
Well, first and foremost, there can't be a 14th or a 15th or a 20th. I was assaulted violently, punched in the face. He grabbed my neck. He wasn't going to let me out of that elevator if I hadn't fought my way out. So there's that piece of it. He shouldn't be walking the streets of Washington, D.C. right now. He's had previous sentences of 10 days for assault, 30 days for assault. But he also hasn't received the help he needs to even have a chance at rehabilitation. You know, politicians usually have these talking points of it either has to be like this or that, go to jail or get help. It's a lot more complicated than that. And I'm just tired of the politicization of these issues. This is really complicated. Mm-hmm. And both sides, frankly, of the aisle tend to do it from time to time. You know, addiction, it's a really big issue in this country. Mental health, it's a really big issue. And the criminal justice system is broken. If I'm his 13th victim, he just got out of jail 2 weeks ago before he attacked me. All of these things can be true at the same time. And I think that's why I need to go back to Washington to keep doing the work. If we want to keep our community safe, which of course we do, that's why I've been so supportive of our local law enforcement and helping them do their jobs. But if we want to keep people safe, part of that is addressing the mental health and addiction crisis in our country. Homelessness, another key indicator. And, you know, we can't just oversimplify any of this. I'm headed down to the border on Wednesday. I have a subcommittee hearing because I'm on the committee that deals with healthcare in our nation to talk about the fentanyl crisis. And I'm sure I'm going to hear my colleagues talk about, you know, Biden's border crisis. I don't know how we get there, but we have to sit down and have a conversation that isn't really aimed at who wins or loses the next election in our country. Kids are dying. People are dying in our country of drug overdoses every single day. Families are torn apart by addiction, and I have to go back and see if I can be any part of helping to solve these issues.
How do you heal, Representative Craig? How do you not replay what happened to you Thursday morning in your mind over and over again?
Well, I think it wouldn't be fair to think that I haven't and won't. Like, I'm very aware and have replayed the events many times since Thursday. You know, I went into fight or flight mode on Thursday. Now I see the record of this individual, how broken and how violent he's been in the past. And so now I know how lucky I was to not be more injured. You know, my family's been incredibly supportive, but that's actually the hardest part of this, is I want to make them feel better, that I'm okay. And I think it's important that I tell my constituents and people in Minnesota that, you know, I'm doing a mental health check-in too this week. That yes, I was checked out by folks at the Capitol, the physicians, the physical aspects of this, but that I'm also going to make sure that I check in on psychological and emotional aspects of this, and it would be naive to say that there aren't any, and there won't be more. So, like anything else, I'll work my way through it with the support of my family and some really amazing people that I represent.
You must have been scared.
I don't know if I had time to be scared. When he demanded to go to my apartment, all I knew at that moment was there's no way in hell that's going to happen. So, you know, this is the first time I've been a victim of crime, but what I knew is I needed to get away from this individual, and that if that meant I had to fight my way out of the elevator, that's what I was going to do.
What does it feel like to you as a wife to know that your partner may be extremely worried about you because of your line of work?
It's the hardest thing. Is, you know, we're family. We make this decision together. I don't decide to run for Congress every 2 years or, you know, endure his TV commercials every couple of years without input from the family. And I think we all understand that there are risks. We've taken a lot of precautions on the targeted risk side of this. Security is now present at every parade that I walk in, every public event that we advise to the press or to the public. So again, we spend a lot of time from a security perspective on those targeted attacks to make sure that we have protection if they happen. The random one, it's a little tougher to protect from. If my family said you can't, we don't want you to do this anymore, I wouldn't do this anymore. But I think, what's so fascinating about this congressional district, it's the only swing one left. When I think about, why am I still here? What am I doing? I think about the policy things that we've talked about today, but I also think about that first run for Congress and what I said after. A slightly Republican district from Minnesota just elected the first lesbian mother of 4 ever elected from Minnesota. I'm here to try to help create the kind of nation, the kind of country that, I'm not just the first of anything. I never ran for Congress to be the first of anything. I'm in Congress because, I want to create the kind of country where I'm just the first of many who have this kind of opportunity, who can serve our country. And as much as, in the last 48 hours, the haters have come back out, calling and emailing the office, there's just so much more love. And I feel like we have to keep working to create that kind of country.
Heat wave smashing record.
Friday on NPR News, I'm Brian Baxt. Minnesota's 2nd Congressional District stretches from suburban West St. Paul and Shakopee down through the college and farm areas of Northfield to the rolling hills of Elysian. In other words, the district's complexion is quite varied. It's seen as Minnesota's most competitive U.S. House district and one of those that will have a big bearing on which party leads Congress next year. The main candidates on the ballot are incumbent Democrat Angie Craig and Republican challenger Joe Tayrab. They've joined us at the Minnesota Public Radio Maud Moon Weyerhaeuser studio for a debate. The rules are simple. I wrote the questions and neither campaign had input or was provided a list. There's no hard time clock, though we'll try to keep it even. You'll each have plenty of time for responses and rebuttals where needed, but please don't talk over one another because it makes it hard for our listeners to understand what you're saying. We'll save time for closing arguments at the end. Does that all sound good?
Sounds good. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks for having us, Brian.
We've got a lot to cover, so let's just jump right into the questions. Poll after poll shows the economy as the driving issue this year. While inflation has come into check recently, the price of many consumer goods remains elevated. Unemployment, while historically low, has ticked up some. Angie Craig, how would you rate the economy?
Well, look, no one should be taking a victory lap. I was buying groceries last night, and hamburger meat was, somewhere between $6 and $9 a pound. And so, these are the issues that I talk to my constituents about every single day. And some of the ways in which I've tried to address these issues is by staying focused on them. Number one, I have a bill that would create a federal group, a federal task force that would look at getting after exactly why consumer prices have been so high. It's no secret that corporate profits are up, corporate CEO pay is up, and there must be something to that. And I think we need some oversight just to make sure that if consumers are paying more, we know why. Gas prices, again, coming down, but I've got a bill, year-round E15, that would allow
my family farmers to be able to expand the use of ethanol, blended ethanol and gasoline. And you can often find unleaded 88 ethanol at the pump for 40 cents less a gallon. And then finally, healthcare has been a big focus area of mine. And I'm so proud the $35 a month copay on insulin got through the House. Prescription drug prices, Medicare, consumers are going to save $7.5 billion next year because Medicare is finally negotiating drug prices in this country. So these are some of the areas. And, I'm also trying to put a few more bucks in seniors' pockets, Brian, because...
And we're going to get into some of these things.
Social Security.
What's your appraisal of the economy?
Yeah, Brian, thank you so much again for moderating. Thank you, Congresswoman, for being here. As a middle-class guy, I'd love to just introduce myself a little bit here. Born and raised in Minnesota, was the proud son of an immigrant from Sudan. I served on active duty for 5 years in the United States Marine Corps, where I deployed to Iraq, and then I was honored to work with law enforcement to put bad guys behind bars in Minnesota. And I think nothing says that we're losing the American dream, which is why I'm running for Congress. I can't sit idly by while we're losing the American dream. Nothing says that more than where middle-class families are struggling on the economy. Right now, prices are up, inflation is up. Middle-class families are getting crushed by inflation. The average family has to pay $13,000 more, earn $13,000 more per year to have the same standard of living that they did just a couple years ago. And how did we get here? Honestly, we had the terrible Biden-Harris economic agenda that passed reckless spending bill after reckless spending bill. Bill Clinton's Treasury Secretary and Obama's economic advisor said that these were the least responsible macroeconomic policies of the last 40 years that caused inflation. You know who voted for those bills? Congresswoman Craig. Congresswoman Craig voted for those bills that threw gas on the inflation fire. I think we can go a different direction. I mean, we do have a clear choice here in this election. We have the status quo in the economy with Congresswoman Craig, and we have a different direction. We need to cut reckless spending, root out waste, fraud, and abuse, and we need to lower taxes. Families need it. We need to go a new direction.
Brief rebuttal.
Prescription drug prices for seniors are coming down. They just are. Gas prices have come down. We'll keep working on E15. And at the end of the day, I want to put a little more money in seniors' pockets by making them not have to pay federal taxes on Social Security anymore.
You brought up this task force bill that you've got to look into price gouging. Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris has proposed a ban on price gouging for food and other essential items. Where do you stand on that? And if not, what would you do instead?
Well, the price gouging bill that I support would put together a group of people that would look, if retailers are raising prices above inflation, then they would get to the bottom of why is that happening? Is it a supply chain issue? Is it corporations are taking advantage of consumers? We know that there is a part of what's been happening is that, companies raise prices, and have you ever seen one actually decrease it after that point in time?
Joe Tayrab, according to the National Conference of State Legislatures, at least 36 states, including Minnesota now, have some form of price gouging law in the books involving emergency or disaster situations in many of them. Why shouldn't there be a national action to head off severe price increases?
Look, we had the Fed Bank in San Francisco say that price gouging had nothing to do with inflation. What had to do with inflation was the Clinton economic advisor and Biden economic advisor saying that we passed the least responsible macroeconomic policies in the last 40 years. And Angie Craig, Congresswoman Craig, you voted for those bills that increased inflation. I think that the solution here is pretty common sense and basic. We need to put more money in middle-class families' pockets by cutting reckless spending. We need to root out waste, fraud, and abuse, because God knows we have a ton of that in Minnesota. And we need to actually pass tax relief. And that's a big issue, big difference in this race, because from my understanding, Congresswoman Craig, you want to actually let the tax cuts of 2017 lapse, aka you want to raise taxes. I want to put more money in middle-class people's pockets. That's the key to this.
Did the bills you voted for contribute to inflation?
During the Trump administration, there was a global pandemic, and the Congress approved a number of spending bills under President Trump to make sure that our small businesses did not go out of business. We've seen inflation come down. It's about 2.5%. We see that the jobs report out this morning is still pretty strong. And at the end of the day, the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, is actually going to reduce spending by about $200 billion for Medicare because they can finally negotiate their pricing. So at the end of the day, we've come through a global pandemic. I think the Fed rate cut is good news to American consumers, but this is an area, gas prices, grocery prices, prescription drug costs, that I've been laser focused on as a member of Congress from the 2nd District.
I think we need to step back for a second here, because I hear what you're saying, Congresswoman Craig, about the Inflation Reduction Act. But what people need to know is what you said about the Inflation Reduction Act in 2022 in a debate is you said that it would actually reduce the deficit by $300 billion. You know what the CBO actually came out with recently? It actually blew the deficit by $550 billion. So those are facts that you can't get around, the facts that people are dealing with, and the fact that you mentioned victory lap. Right now, the American middle-class families are getting victory lapped by inflation and high prices. They don't deserve that. They deserve people that are fighting for them. I'm a middle-class guy. I think we want more money in our pockets, not in the pockets.
There's 30 seconds.
Yeah, there's no doubt that we need to focus on middle-class policies. And the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act, there were some good parts of that in 2025, when I'm back in Congress, I'm going to fight to keep the raised standard deduction. That's one thing that I'm going to fight to keep in that. But we know that the majority of those tax benefits went to the top 3% in our country. And I think we need to make sure we focus on the middle class and small business.
I want to talk about taxes here. Both presidential candidates have endorsed a version of no taxes on tip without specifying where they'd go to cover the cost. What's your stance on that? We'll start with you, Joe Tabor.
Yeah, I think we definitely need to make sure we're fighting for the middle class. I'm a middle class guy myself. Grew up in a middle class family down in Southwest Minnesota and Windham, and we need to make sure we're fighting for the middle class. I think no tax on tips makes a ton of sense. I think making sure we're not actually imposing a tax on Social Security makes a ton of sense. We need to make sure we're focused on the middle class, because that's what's driving. That's what America is based on.
I want to follow up. Why should tipped income be treated differently than earned income?
I think my goal is to put more money in people's pockets, and whatever way we can do that, and whatever way we can get more money in middle-class families' pockets is what I'm going to be fighting for. And of course, people who are fighting hard for tips, people who are on fixed incomes, who are on Social Security, and more of their money should not be going to the government with taxes. We need to make sure we're fighting for them getting as much money as they can get.
No tax on tips?
The spending side is interesting because, it's also about taxes. And look, if regular middle-class Americans are going to pay taxes on their full income, shouldn't millionaires and billionaires pay taxes on their full income? And in fact, I find it ironic that you say you want to end taxes on Social Security, because I'm actually carrying the bill that would end taxes on Social Security. And you're on tape talking to a voter in the 2nd District saying that you want to raise the retirement age in this country and that you're open to privatizing Social Security. Look, when we come back to the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act, $5 trillion is what that bill costs. I'm sure we're going to talk about debt and deficits, and I think at the end of the day, we've got to make sure that we're talking about both sides of this.
We're going to be clear about that, because clearly, Congresswoman Craig, you've obviously been caught with doing campaign attack ads that have been rated a deep with truthfulness by KFCP and WCCO on other issues. So clearly what you're saying here is not true. I have a fundamental promise that we need to keep to seniors. My parents are seniors living in Worthington right now, living on a fixed income. Of course, I don't want to, we cannot raise the retirement age at all. We cannot cut any benefits to seniors. That's obviously a lie, and you understand that you can't run on your record on the economy. You can't run on your record on the border. So you need to make up these lies, and so I'm confident that, look, we need to keep these promises to seniors, and that's what we're going to do.
Well, Joe, just to clear up where you're at, Social Security is expected to run into some financial strains within the next decade. There's a few options. You can either change eligibility, raise taxes, or introduce some other new measure, perhaps privatization. Where are you?
Yeah, I mean, what I've said from the beginning is that, look, we made a promise to seniors, we made a promise to veterans, we made a promise to those on Medicare. We can't cut any benefits for people that we made promises to and that have been paying into that workforce. We need to make sure we're keeping those promises. The other thing that we have to do is, look, I'm part of the next generation. We may need to make sure that this is solvent for the next generation, because what we know from estimates is that in 2035, it's not going to be able to pay out the benefits that it's supposed to. So I think the big thing that we have to do, again, is not raising retirement age, not cutting any benefits, but is saying, hey, how can we grow the economic pie? And so that whatever slice that is going into Social Security is going to grow naturally. And so my goal is to, hey, look, let's reduce energy prices. Let's cut regulations. Let's cut taxes so small businesses and families can thrive.
Angie Craig, how do you keep Social Security solvent?
Oh, well, I literally have a bill to do that. It's a bill that would it would end double taxation on seniors paying taxes on their federal Social Security. To do that, we would ask people to pay their fair share into Social Security. A lot of people don't know that after $168,000, you stop paying into Social Security. If you are lucky enough to make $1 million, keep paying into Social Security. We raise enough money to extend the trust fund by 20 years, and we also cut about $9 trillion over a period of time, according to CBO, from the national debt. And look, I'm going to address his topic. It's on tape. The press has it, Joe. You can't go back and say that you did not say to a voter you wanted to raise the retirement age and that you thought we were going to have to privatize Social Security. I have a bill to save it, and I would never touch a senior's Social Security.
You're shaking your head.
Again, I'm shaking my head because my parents, Congresswoman Craig, are on Social Security. So if you believe that I'm going to be in favor of cutting Social Security benefits to my parents who live here in Minnesota, you're severely mistaken. Of course, we've made promises to seniors. We're not going to cut Social Security benefits at all. There's no going to be raising of the retirement age. We have to deal with this freight train that's coming at us in terms of the fact that Social Security is going to not be able to pay out benefits estimated in the year 2035. So what kind of common sense solutions can we come up with to making sure that it's solvent?
I want to ask you about your bill on Social Security related to shielding it from income tax. It caps it out, as I read it, caps it out for households earning less than $250,000. Why did you draw the line there?
Well, look, I thought we wanted to leave just a little bit of a gap for people to begin paying back into Social Security. So you're right. Today, it caps it out at $168. You stop paying in. For those who make $250 or less, today you'll pick it back up if you make $250. Look, in my district that I represent, if you make $250,000 or together a family makes $500,000, that's a pretty good living. And to ask them to, again, pay into Social Security on that income, I think is fair.
Joe Tayrab, would you put a cap on the exemption, or do you just want to exempt it altogether?
Look, I think those are types of common sense solutions that I'm willing to, agree with you and say, Congresswoman Craig, I think some of those solutions seem good and fair to me. I think what's unfair is obviously when you take any comments I make out of context and say that somehow I want to, raise your retirement age, which isn't true. I think my main goal is to find common sense solutions that put more money into the pockets of middle-class families and small businesses by growing that economic pie. And I think that's going to be the best way to actually keep Social Security solvent for the future.
I want to ask you about the nonstop brinksmanship that we've seen in Washington around spending bills. There was one just last week that would keep the government open. Two of Minnesota's Republicans backed it, Tom Emmer and Pete Stauber. Two opposed it, Brad Finstad and Michelle Fischbach. How would you have voted?
Look, I am very frustrated by just the process in Washington. And honestly, I'm not someone who's been in Washington for the past 6 years and running for Congress for the past 8 years. I'm a political outsider. And I think, honestly, that we can have spending bills that aren't done in these massive omnibus bills that are confusing, that are thousands of pages. That doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to people across the district who just want to know plainly what are in these bills. I think we should be able to keep our government running. And I think we need to prioritize, again, common sense solutions that focus on middle-class families and putting more money in there.
So would you have been a yes or a no on that bill?
I would have been a yes in the bill.
Congressman Craig, you were a yes. What was your justification, or why did you vote that way?
Well, Republicans are in control of the Congress, and so, it's silly to sit here and say that we should do our bills under regular order. I agree with you on that. And unfortunately, Republicans could only get 5 of the 12 spending bills done, and we're in another situation where we have to extend government funding under a continuing resolution. Look, I've got air traffic controllers that if we shut the government down, would have to go to work every single day in Farmington with no pay. We've got TSA agents who, if we shut the government down, would have to go to work every single day with no pay. And by the way, I've got a bill that would take pay away from members of Congress if they shut the government down, because I don't think members of Congress should get paid. So I voted for the bill, Brian, for one simple reason. I'm not willing to shut down the government over political brinkmanship.
Did you want to respond?
Yeah, I did want to respond because Congresswoman Craig, I appreciate a lot of the work that you've done, but clearly the results aren't there. The middle class families are looking for results. Look, if you hire a contractor to do some work at your house and they didn't do a good job, right? They somehow messed up. You're not going to hire them again. They might be the nicest person, the hardest working person, but you're not going to hire them again. Right now, Congresswoman Craig, you're not doing the job in the economy. Middle class families, the biggest thing that they care about, because I'm a middle class guy myself, is that we care about high prices that are crushing us right now, and an open border as well that you filled out as well. And so we need to make sure that people understand that your record is, you talk about many of these bills that you've worked on, fine and good. But the main issue is the economy and high prices. You have failed.
I just want to clarify, though. You said what you said on tape. Are you really denying? You said that you were just rambling. I mean, I ramble when I talk about what I did.
You're talking about Social Security.
Yeah.
Well,
I ramble when I talk about what I did last weekend. When someone asked me, do we think we need to raise the retirement age, I would never say yes.
I didn't say yes, Congresswoman Craig. What I've been focused on right now is clearly you want to talk about what's on tape. You don't want to talk about what you voted for, yes or no. You voted for the American Rescue Plan. You voted for the Inflation Reduction Act. You said in a debate in 2020 that it would reduce our deficit. You know what happened? The CBO came back and said that it raised the deficit. So those are facts that you can't get around. And unfortunately, we can debate here and talk about it, and words are going back and forth, but middle-class families are suffering under the votes that you passed.
I want to move to another topic here. Joe Tayrab, you've said at events and on your website that you would oppose federal abortion ban legislation. I want to clarify. Does that mean you'd vote against bills that include abortion restrictions based on a viability requirement?
I'm against a federal ban on abortions, any federal ban or restrictions on abortions. And I think we need to take a step back for a moment, because this is obviously an emotional and a personal issue for all people, all women. When a woman faces an unplanned pregnancy, so many emotions are there. Maybe joy, maybe pain, maybe anxiety, maybe fear. I know that because my mom faced an unplanned pregnancy when she was pregnant with me. And I am thankful that after she had called it Planned Parenthood, she got plugged into what's called the Pregnancy Resource Center that just gave her resources and love and support. And so I'm only here to this day because of the work of that organization. And I think that tells me from my experience, from my mom's experience, that we need to come at this issue with way more grace and compassion, of course. But we also need to support women who are facing these really difficult circumstances. And yes, I am against a federal ban. This is not a federal issue. This is a state issue. And that's why also, because we know we need to treat this issue with grace and compassion, why it's really unfortunate that Congresswoman Craig has chosen to use this as a political wedge issue. And she has been shown by KSTP and WCCO that her attack ads against me on the issue are false and misleading. Those aren't my words. Those are KSTP and WCCO's words. I think what we can do is push forward where we have consensus on this issue. IVF, great, we need to push forward with that. Adoption and foster care, those are things, common sense consensus that we all say, look, I've had friends that have tried to pursue adoption and foster care. It's way too cumbersome. We can push forward on that, and I think that's what we need to do.
Representative Craig, what do you make of his states' rights argument that this is a state issue?
Well, let me start with, Joe, I'm grateful that your mom made the decision that was right for her. All women in America are asking for is the freedom to do what they think is right for them too. That's what freedom is all about. Look, Joe Tayrab is an anti-abortion activist. In college, he was in a pro-life organization. He's on the board of a pregnancy crisis center. It's what they call it. It's a board that will not refer a woman for an abortion or even advise them that that's an option. He filled out a survey with Minnesota's biggest pro-life organization, Minnesota Concerned Citizens for Life, that says if he's elected to Congress, that he will do nothing to weaken a single state law, coming to your question, Brian, that is in place at the time he's elected. Now, I'm going to let listeners and women and their families judge for themselves whether what I'm saying is correct or not. So 20 states, 22 to be precise, around our country have now banned or restricted abortion. 10 of those states have banned abortion, even in the case of rape and incest. What Joe has done is pledged to Minnesota Concerned Citizens for Life that he will do nothing to stop those states from banning abortion, even in the case of rape and incest. And Joe, I just think you're wrong, and I know that my constituents in Minnesota's 2nd District think that's wrong, because if you're in Congress and you won't stand up and say, no way, I'm not going to stand by while a state forces a rape survivor to carry a child with no choice for 40 weeks and have that child, you don't belong in Congress.
Response?
Congressman Craig, I'm running to represent Minnesota's 2nd Congressional District. And as you know, abortion access in Minnesota is available in all 9 months of pregnancy without regard. That's just the case, Congressman Craig. Is that not the case?
Minnesota's law, no viability requirement.
Minnesota's law allows for what we all want and had for 50 years under Roe. And that's what we're asking for Roe to be restored across our country.
And so my point is that I'm running to represent Minnesota's 2nd Congressional District. I'm a Minnesotan, a proud Minnesotan. And I respect the will of Minnesota voters that have said that abortion is available through all 9 months of pregnancy for any reason. Look, obviously this is a contentious issue. It shouldn't be. We should come at this issue with grace and compassion. I find it sad that in your little litany of reasons why people shouldn't consider supporting me, because me wanting to serve on the board of a pregnancy resource center that gave me life, I find that sad. It isn't as sad, again, as the attack ads that you put against me, that KST, because you want to confuse voters about my stance. I support the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. You shake your head as if that's not the case. It is the case. They said so. They fact-checked you. You're incorrect. And you know what? I think what voters need to understand is you have to put these false attack ads against me because you can't run on your record on the economy.
States around this country are forcing survivors of rape to carry their baby, and only the federal government can stop that. And let me just add one more thing about Minnesota. The Dobbs decision, if Minnesota ever fell into Republican hands, could also do the same.
One more question about this reproductive health.
Yes.
You might be able to get your response in there. IVF, you brought it up. Former President Donald Trump has suggested the federal government should subsidize or require insurance coverage for fertility treatments. Are you on board with that?
I'm, of course, in support of IVF and supporting IVF.
Government assisted?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, we need to get back to this issue because, again, I'm running to represent Minnesota's 2nd Congressional District in Minnesota. I don't want federal politicians to dictate what abortion policy is in Minnesota. That means a congressman in California or a senator in Arkansas could dictate what abortion policy is in Minnesota. So Congresswoman Craig, if you want to go back to your home state of Arkansas and represent them, you could do that. I'm born and bred in Minnesota, born and raised in Minnesota. I grew up going fishing up north in Minnesota. I'm proud to be a Minnesotan, and I'm going to be proud to represent the people of Minnesota's 2nd Congressional District, making sure we're upholding our rights and representing the people in Minnesota.
Just to put a closing point on this topic, are there any federal restrictions that you could see yourself supporting on abortion?
Right back to Roe. And for 50 years in this country, we lived under Roe. Women had reproductive freedom across this country, and that's the standard. The Women's Health Protection Act is the bill that I've voted for twice already. And I'll end with this. If we need to have compassion and support for women, part of that is standing up as a member of Congress to states like Georgia, who are letting women literally bleed out in parking lots of emergency rooms because doctors are afraid to treat them. It's just wrong. And look, that's not freedom. That's not this country.
You're listening to a live debate in the 2nd Congressional District between Angie Craig and Joe Tayrab on NPR News. Let's move to immigration. Immigration and border security is a motivating issue for many voters. Angie Craig, you voted against a Republican-crafted Secure the Border bill last year that passed only the House, yet you've called the situation on the U.S. southern border a national security issue and said restoring order should be one of the highest priority. Square those.
Well, look, this is an area where I think the Biden administration has gotten it wrong a lot of Biden's term. And that's why I voted 5 times to condemn with Republicans the Biden administration on the work that they're doing for the southern border. You know, the bill that you referred to doesn't have a single cent in it to make sure that we stop fentanyl from coming across the southern border. And, you know, I have worked tirelessly. I've been down to the southern border, 17 Republicans, 3 Democrats, to look specifically and talk specifically to Border Patrol agents about what they want to see at the southern border. And what they want to see, we can't even get Republican leadership to bring over to the House of Representatives. The bipartisan border bill that was negotiated by the Senate, by a very conservative lawmaker. The former president asked House leadership to not even bring for a vote. So, Brian, you know, I think we have to address the crisis at the border. Securing our border is a really important issue to me. In fact, in 2022, I said to the Biden administration, you can't end Title 42 prematurely because you're going to see a surge at the southern border, and we're not ready for that. They did it anyway. Now, I asked the president, and they finally did it, to, under executive order, put forward some restrictions at the southern border.
So you want daily limits on the number of asylum admissions, and what should that be?
Well, I want the bipartisan border bill that was negotiated out of the Senate to come to the House for debate. Look, this is an area where we have to have a secure border. I have worked tirelessly. It's one of the reasons why the Minneapolis Police and Peace Officers Association, rank and file officers here in Minnesota, have endorsed my campaign over Joe's, is because I have worked on public safety issues hand in hand with them. I've worked on securing the southern border and even taking on my own party, speaking out in order to do it.
Joe Tayrab, has your party found more value in this as a campaign issue than motivation to fix it?
Well, we need to go back, Brian, to your initial question was, asking Congresswoman Craig if she could square these two inconsistencies. And that's like asking her to square a circle, because clearly you voted against a border security bill in 2023 that would have just done some basic things. It would have given more funding to Border Patrol agents, so we have more Border Patrol agents. It would have actually secured the border by building a wall, which you've previously made comments that you were against the wall, but that's just common sense. If I have a wall and a window and a door in my house, we need to make sure we have a border for our country. And it would have actually reformed the asylum process. Right now, we have a massive immigration, migrant crisis problem, a human trafficking crisis problem, a fentanyl problem. And I know about that because as a criminal prosecutor, as a state prosecutor, and then as a federal prosecutor, I put fentanyl traffickers behind bars, cartel-linked drug traffickers behind bars. And it's sad and unacceptable that politicians like you, Congresswoman Craig, had some hand in allowing an open border that had to be cleaned up by folks like in law enforcement that I worked with hand in hand to actually take that poison off of our streets. You voted against that Secure Our Border Act, but you also voted against some other common sense things, and that's a word I'm going to say a lot during this. Common sense things like the SAVE Act. Since we have over 10 million illegal immigrants in our country, maybe we should make sure that they're not able to vote. And the SAVE Act that you have voted against, Congresswoman Craig, said that, look, let's just not have illegal immigrants voting in our elections. Or a bill that just would have said, we're not going to give federal funding to sanctuary cities, and funding that goes to migrants should be cut off. And you voted against that.
You put a lot on the table. What do you want to say about those votes, particularly around the SAVE Act, which would have reinforced what's already illegal?
So, Brian, you said it first, right? I wasn't going to shut down the government in order to pass a law that already exists in this country. So that's ridiculous. And oh, by the way, I voted actually with former President Trump to add about $1 billion for his border wall, but it's more than barriers or walls down at the southern border. That's what Border Patrol told me when I was down there. That's why they endorsed the bipartisan, bicameral border bill that your party refuses to take up because they think it's better to bring some border talking points to a debate than actually address the issue. Joe, it feels very much like, because I'm in the top 3% of all bipartisan members of Congress. I voted against the Biden administration 30% of the time. I'm the sixth most independent Democrat in the Congress right now, according to ProPolitico. It feels very much like you want to be running against a different Democrat. But I've got bad news for you. You're running against me.
Joe Taylor, I want to ask you about something that President, you'll get a chance to say something here, but former President Trump has called for mass deportations. Would he have your support in funding that? And do you have any hesitation about that strategy?
Look, we definitely need to make sure that people who are here illegally, especially who have come over recently, I think they don't have a right to be here. At the same time, as we talk to business owners, and I've talked to business owners across the district, there are folks who have been here for a long period of time. Look, maybe we should step back and say, look, I'm the proud son of an immigrant. Our nation is a nation of immigrants. My dad came here because he saw America as a beacon of freedom, as an immigrant from Sudan, and he lived his American dream, and I'm living in light of that. But at the same time, we can have law and order on our border, and we can say that folks who have been contributing to our society, who haven't committed crimes, who have been taxpayers, it might not be pragmatic to go up and round those folks, of course, but at the same time, we need to make sure we have some law and order. And so folks who have come here more recently, of course, we need to prioritize people who have committed crimes. And we've seen lately with some of the numbers of the number of people who have committed murder and sexual assaults and other crimes, those numbers have gone up. And I just need to address really quickly what Congresswoman talks about in terms of, you talk about all these different facts and you being bipartisan this, bipartisan that. Again, I go back to the basic tenets of, have you done your job? Have you gotten results? No, you have not, because we have high inflation. You voted for inflation-causing acts. You have an open border. You voted against bills that would have actually secured the border. Those are the facts. You can't get around them.
All right, we're going to change topics here. The national security issue, another big one that's on a lot of people's minds right now is the situation in the Middle East. It's deteriorating by the day, and the U.S. ally Israel is at the epicenter. It's military conflict with Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and fending off missile strikes from Iran. Particularly with Iran, Joe Taylor, where are you on the continuum of restraint versus anything is acceptable retaliation?
We need to make sure we're standing up to Iran and to our geopolitical foes. I know that to my core. I was proud to serve for 5 years on active duty in the United States Marine Corps as a military JAG officer, and I deployed to Iraq in support of our effort to defeat and destroy ISIS. And so my job as a military lawyer was to give the up or down guidance to our commanders when we were doing those strikes against ISIS. And I know that sometimes there are people in this world that don't respond to negotiation, they only respond to force. And some of those people, of course, are Iran, are Russia when it comes to Ukraine, and of course, China. And so what is sad and unacceptable is that we've had a Biden and Harris administration supported by Congresswoman Craig that has routinely projected weakness and not strength, whether that's our bungled exit out of Afghanistan, whether that's passing sanctions relief to Iran. And it was particularly sad when Congresswoman Craig in 2020, after we eliminated General Soleimani in 2020, who is an Iranian general responsible for the deaths of thousands of people, including hundreds of Americans, Congresswoman Craig came out with a tweet that delegitimized that strike. What we need to do is stand by Israel. What we need to do is stand against Iran. What we need to do is stand against our geopolitical foes strongly. We need to project peace through strength.
Representative Craig, what's your stance on the U.S. posture toward Iran in this situation?
Let me start by saying thank you, Joe, for your service to our nation in the Marines. As a community, we really appreciate that. I can't talk about this without acknowledging that there are still more than 100 hostages as we come up on the 1-year anniversary on Monday of the horrific events that unfolded in Israel on October 7th. Hamas is a terrorist organization. We must stand by our ally Israel. We know that Iran is the nexus of Hamas in Gaza, of Hezbollah in Lebanon. We know the Houthis. Look, we must stand by our ally. And, I voted to support assistance to Israel for its defense. You look what happened just last week, 180 missiles coming from Iran. Israel is America's strongest ally in the Middle East, and we must continue to stand next to them.
Would either of you support the use of any U.S. troops on the ground in Israel or going into Iran or Lebanon?
Look, we need to make sure that Israel is given all the equipment and the resources and the support they need right now. Those are types of commitments that we can't talk about right now. We need to make sure we're supporting Israel 100%. And of course, I agree with Congresswoman Craig's comments about Hamas. In fact, when we were going against ISIS, what I saw in ISIS was very much similar, sadly, to what we see with Hamas, with the terrible October 7th attacks. So we need to make sure we're supporting Israel, but what we cannot do is undercut them. We can't delegitimize what they're trying to do. We can't make these statements about ceasefires or criticizing the eliminating of people like General Soleimani.
Troops on the ground?
Look, I think we have to do everything in our power to keep troops completely out of the region. We know that there's some assistance required to Israel right now from, the Red Sea. But at the end of the, I'm sorry, not the Red Sea. At the end of the day, we have to make sure that we are supporting with the technology and the tools. And frankly, on the troops on the ground question, my biggest concern is Russia in Ukraine. I'm very concerned if we don't help Ukraine, stop Russia, that they're going to end up in a NATO country and we might actually have to go in there.
And I was going to go there next. Joe Tarab, you've adopted a peace through strength posture. To that end, is the U.S. doing too little, too much, or does it have the right level of involvement in Ukraine and its battle against the Russian incursion?
Yeah, I think we need to first step back and talk about why Russia was even in a position as our geopolitical foe to invade Ukraine, which is unacceptable, of course, and no nation, especially Russia, our geopolitical foe, should take over and infringe on the sovereignty of another nation. We only got there because of the projected weakness of the Biden administration. We had, again, like the bundled exit out of Afghanistan. We had sanctions relief for Iran. That's why nations like Russia was able to go in Ukraine. So of course we need to support efforts to fight against our geopolitical foe. And it should have been more early. And so that's why I firmly believe that we need to stand firm in making sure that we can't give a blank check, of course, to Ukraine, but we need to support efforts like the effort in Ukraine to make sure that Russia cannot infringe on the sovereignty of other nation states.
Angie, Craig, many Americans are asking about the extent to which the U.S. should remain involved. What's your message to them?
Well, I think we have to continue to provide resources both to the state of Israel as well as to Ukraine. Again, the point is we do not want America's sons and daughters in either of these places on the ground if we can possibly stop it. And, I'm committed to continuing to support our allies, but there are difficult roads ahead, I think, in this region for us.
Joe Tarab, you've mentioned that you worked in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and during your time there, you had a role in the case of Brian Mock. He was a Minnesota man convicted of crimes related to January 6th, specifically pushing multiple Capitol Police officers to the ground, kicking and stomping them. Former President Trump has said he would pardon people involved in January 6th and says they were persecuted. Do you agree with him?
Look, I am proud of all of my efforts at the United States Attorney's Office, making sure that we held criminals accountable, whether those were people who are cartel-linked drug traffickers, whether they were defeating our future fraudsters, whether they were Bloods criminal street gang members. And yes, if people, of course, on January 6th committed violent crimes, like that individual you mentioned, I was proud to be part of the effort to ensure that we're actually holding those types of people accountable. And so that's what I'm going to stand by. That's one of my main missions, and that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to run for Congress, was we need to make sure that we're supporting law enforcement. And so that's what I'm going to do in Congress, and that's what I'll be proud of.
So you wouldn't want to see a pardon for someone like Mr. Mock?
Like, I was proud about my effort. I don't think a pardon in that situation, from my understanding of the case, would be appropriate from what I know. I don't know all aspects of the case, because in that case, my argument was about the fact that if someone kicks a police officer, steals a riot